Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP's emotions are raw after discovering their wife of 6 years has been cheating with their best friend. The betrayal blindsided him, who cherished both relationships deeply. They uncovered the affair accidentally when finding the wife's phone, revealing romantic texts and photos exchanged between the two. To confront them publicly, he orchestrated an anniversary dinner with revealing cake messages, leading to a divorce and severed friendships. Now let's get into the story. All of the emotions for this are still so raw, so this might be somewhat jumbled to read, but I recently discovered that my wife of 6 years has been cheating on me for a while with my so-called best friend. To begin with, my wife and I always had a happy marriage, so I was blindsided when I found out what had been going on. She and I had a lot in common. We did almost everything together, and we enjoyed ourselves while doing it. I have known my best friend since my freshman year of college. It was a classic friendship story. He was my first-year roommate, and ever since then, we have been inseparable. Honestly, before I met my wife, he was the most important person in my life. I was estranged from most of my family, and when I graduated college, I had a falling out with my parents, and I haven't spoken to them in years. My wife and best friend always got along. That was one of the things that I loved so much about my wife. She could get along with just about anybody without any problems. I never noticed any flirting or touching or anything like that before with them. Now, I must have just been entirely oblivious leading up until how I found out because I was completely blindsided. Sometimes I wonder if I only found out because of sheer dumb luck, or if there was perhaps some force trying to show me all along. One Saturday, my wife got called into the office to help troubleshoot some problems with some staff, and she happened to forget her phone. I was in my house with my friend. We were just going to play some video games and chill until my wife got back. She ended up calling me for her work to ask me if I could look for her phone because she wasn't sure if she left it there or if she lost it somewhere else. While I was on the phone with her, I asked my friend to call her number. He dialed it, and we both walked around the apartment listening for it to see if we could find it. I was, of course, the one to find it. Before I could yell for him to hang up the phone because I had it, I noticed that the number wasn't saved under his name. It was saved under a woman's name with the word work in parentheses behind it. I thought that was strange, but it wasn't necessarily damning evidence, though I was too curious as to why that was the case to ignore it. I hung up the phone yelling to my friend that I found it and telling my wife that it was there before hanging up the phone with her. I opened their text messages and saw dozens of messages between them. Some of them were romantic, telling each other that they loved each other. Some were explicitly detailing things they wanted to do to each other when they had the next chance, and they even exchanged some pictures. I didn't know what to do. The two people who I cared about most in this entire world had gone behind my back and stabbed me in it. It felt like the world was closing in around me. I've never been a confrontational person, so I didn't want to address my friend about it at the time. I ended up telling him that we should cut our video game session early so I could run the phone to my wife. When he left, I almost completely lost control of myself. I had to fight the urge to scream and break everything in my entire house. After I composed myself, I realized I needed to go through and see when it all started. Apparently, it had been going on for too long, 2 years off and on. It all started when my wife messaged him and told him that if I hadn't been in the picture, she probably would have ended up with him. I'd never felt more broken in my entire life. When I looked at the date of that message, I realized that it was almost exactly 2 years since it was sent. I realized it was almost their anniversary. An idea suddenly hit me, and I felt it would be the best way to confront them both. We were all a part of one big friend group, so I knew exposing them to our friends would be what hurt them the most. I was hurt enough at the time that revenge was all I thought about. So, I planned a dinner party for what I perceived to be their anniversary. I didn't tell my wife or best friend at the time what it was about, but they were both excited about the party. When the day came, most of our friends made it to our house, bringing bottles of wine and dishes to share with everyone. We made it through dinner, but when dessert came, I had a very special cake, brought out for both my wife and friend. Right in the center of the cake were the words "Happy Anniversary," then both of their names. Some of our friends awkwardly laughed and looked around each other, but some of them got what I was doing right away and looked between them with disgust. My wife and friend tried to play it off like they didn't know what was going on, but it was clear that they were trying to save face. I pulled out my phone and read a speech that I prepared for them. I recounted when I first introduced her to my friend and how much their friendship meant to me, and I recited some of the quotes from their text messages. At the end, I said that I wanted a divorce. They both left together, trying to run away from all of the questions our friends were asking them. When they were gone, there was a mixed review of how I handled the situation amongst our friends. Some of them thought that I was being immature, and I should have spoken to them one-on-one, but some of them agreed with how I acted. They said that they deserved to know that people whom they thought were their friends were liars and cheaters. We're going through the divorce proceedings right now, and it's clear that my wife and former best friend are going to try and pursue something together. However, they are completely alone. None of my friends want anything to do with them for how they betrayed me. I just hope that what they did was worth it for them in the end. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his wife at work, fell in love, and got married. Despite agreeing on having kids eventually, disagreements arose over lifestyle choices. Suspicions of infidelity grew when she became pregnant, but intimate relations were scarce. Confirming his doubts, he found messages revealing an affair with their neighbor. He publicly exposed the truth at their baby shower, leading to divorce. Now let's get into the story. I, 33 male, met my wife, 33 female, when we were working in the same office 8 years ago. I was new in town. I just moved to a brand new city for my job, and she was a receptionist at the time. She gave me a tour of the facilities, and we hit it off. It took a few weeks for me to work up the courage to ask her out, but she said yes, and we had been together ever since. We got married a few years later, and everything felt like a dream. We were happy, doing well in our lives, and so in love. Before marriage, we had a conversation about family, and we both wanted children, but we wanted to wait until it was the right time. We saw starting a family in our 20s as giving up our youth, so we made the most of it. We traveled, we went skydiving, and we enjoyed ourselves without having to worry about anyone else. Over the years during our marriage, I started to realize that I wanted to settle down and start a family. However, it was clear that my wife still wanted to have the jet-setting lifestyle that we had before. We actually ended up getting into a lot of arguments about how we wanted different things in our lives. In one of those arguments, I told her that if she wasn't going to have children, I would have to leave her. I know it was a crappy ultimatum, but I had been very clear that I wanted children. She told me about some of the fears she had and how she wanted to be a mom, but she wasn't sure when. I guess that gave me enough hope to stick around. About a year had passed, and approaching the subject was a delicate situation for me, so I tried to avoid it. She was still going out on the weekends with her girlfriends and going to bars and clubs, while I was home recuperating from the work week. I started to notice that she was staying out later and going out more frequently with her friends. Before, she would go out on weeknights as well. When I asked her about it, she told me that she and her friends found a fun, happy hour place and had been going there. One night, I was at home watching a nature documentary while my wife was supposedly at a happy hour with some of her friends. One of those friends happened to be our next-door neighbor who we were pretty close with. She and her husband would invite us over all the time, and we would do the same with them. Someone rang my doorbell, so I got up and answered it. Lo and behold, it was the woman next door that I was under the impression was out with my wife. Apparently, her car wouldn't start, so she needed me to give it a jump since her husband hadn't come home yet. I agreed and grabbed my keys to walk over to her house with her. I asked her why she wasn't at the happy hour with my wife, and she told me that my wife said it was canceled. A lot of red flags were flying for me at that point. Our neighbors were probably some of our closest friends. I didn't understand why my wife would lie to her and tell her the happy hour was canceled. As we were talking more, She mentioned that she had really been looking forward to it, and she was upset that it was canceled because her husband had been working late a lot more. Right away, I was kind of suspicious about that. Maybe it was my own paranoia, or maybe I was putting some pieces together that I didn't even know were connected, but I was wondering if there might have been something going on with my wife and my neighbor. When she got home, I asked her about it outright. She told me that I was being crazy for assuming that she would be cheating on me with our neighbor of all people. Then she explained why she told our neighbor the happy hour was canceled. Apparently, she had rubbed someone in her group of friends the wrong way, and they were uncomfortable with her being there. I believe what she said at the time, but in hindsight, it didn't make any sense. Our neighbor was the sweetest woman, and I couldn't understand how she would rub someone the wrong way like that. With all our issues, our intimate life had pretty much gone out the window. We had a lot of built-up resentment toward each other, and we didn't really talk about it in a healthy way to want to be with each other. One night, when I got home from work, my wife was home and very eager to sleep with me. I was surprised, but I didn't think much of it. I was just happy it was happening. About a week later, she was waiting for me when I got home from work in the living room, holding a pregnancy test in her hand. At the time, I was completely over the moon. I was finally going to have a kid. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that it wasn't mine. She wasn't going to clubs or happy hours because of the pregnancy, but she was still out quite often. I felt like we should have been together through most of the pregnancy, but it still felt kind of like she was avoiding me. Something that occurs to me now, but I didn't think much of the time, is that she never wanted me to go with her to the ultrasound appointments. She would always tell me that they weren't anything important, but I wanted to see the little baby on the monitor. I was finally able to convince her to let me go to one. While we were there, the doctor showed us our baby on the monitor, and I was so moved I almost cried. Out of curiosity, I asked her if they had an estimated conception date. My wife quickly stepped in and played it off like they would have no way of knowing, but the doctor said that they could give a rough estimate, usually within a week of the actual date. She gave me the estimated time range, and later on, when I was thinking about it, I realized that it was during the period of time my wife and I hadn't been together in months. She and I had intimate together one time, and a week later she told me she was pregnant. I did a little bit of research online to figure out if a week was enough time to get a positive test, and from what I gathered, it was pretty rare. It was rare enough for a woman to even notice she was pregnant a week after conception. Something wasn't adding up, and I needed answers before the go-through of my wife's things. That was a boundary neither of us wanted to cross with each other. But in this case, when I thought she was lying to me about being the father of the child I so desperately wanted, I was able to justify doing it. I logged into her laptop while she was out, and I found countless messages through her social media pages between her and our neighbor. All of my suspicions about the two of them had been correct. They had been sleeping together for several months, and it was clear through the messages that the baby was his. He didn't want anything to do with it, and he was worried that it would ruin his life if anything came out about the affair. They both agreed that they would pretend the baby was mine. I honestly can't put into words how heartbreaking that was to confirm. Having a child was my #1 priority at the time. I was so happy that it was finally happening, and all of that was taken from me. I wasn't going to let them get away with what they were trying to do. Neither of them got to ruin my life and pretend like nothing happened. A few weeks passed, and I was pulling away from my wife. I was in the process of getting a divorce attorney and filing the papers so I could surprise her with them. We were throwing a shower so people could buy us gifts and welcome the baby a few months before they came. All of our friends and family came over to our house for the event. It was the perfect time to call them both out for the affair. Before the presents were open and the cake was cut, I stood up next to my wife and told the room that I wanted to say something. Everybody looked at me as if they were expecting me to give some heartfelt message about how much I loved my wife and couldn't wait to welcome our baby into this world together. Instead, I congratulated her and the father on their baby. I could sense that there was some confusion in the room, so I clarified. I let everybody know, including my wife, that I knew the baby wasn't mine. Everyone was shocked and disgusted with her. It takes a special kind of person to pretend like a baby is someone else's. When I was finished, I handed her divorce papers and told her that I would be leaving the house and that I would have nothing to do with her or her baby. My neighbor's wife was furious, and she dragged him outside to tell him off. As it turned out, he was given a position at her father's company and was up for quite the promotion because he planned on retiring. It was a family-owned company, and his father-in-law wanted to make sure it stayed in the family, so he was going to inherit all of it. When they got divorced, that didn't happen. I was able to get a divorce from my wife, and I'm better off without her now. I'm actually with someone else who seems to want the same things in life as I do. We're still in the beginning stages, so I don't know if this is a forever thing, but I have a good feeling about her. My now ex-wife and our neighbor tried to work things out for the sake of the baby, but I guess they only liked each other when they were sneaking around. Neither of them are in relationship. My ex ended up moving back home with her mom because she couldn't afford the rent in our neighborhood by herself.